Hello everybody, I'm Ronan, I'm a programmer, or as I like to say nowadays, I'm a code grognard. If you know what a grognard is, congratulations, you're a nerd. If you don't, that just means that I complain all the time, and that I'm also a veteran, specifically a veteran of the Browsers War. And actually, this is during the Browsers War that I started programming, around 1997 or something like that. It was a long time ago, but still, I missed out on what I think was one of the most important years in software programming, which is 1993. You may think that 1993 is such an important year because it is the year where Sun released to the public the software for the World Wide Web, but that's not what I mean. You may also think that it's an important year because it's the birth year of Ruby, but this is not what I have in mind either. I think that 1993 is an important year because that's the year where the Sisters of Mercy released their compilation album, A Slight Case of Overbombing, featuring the song Temple of Love, 1992. And right there, you know that it's a song about software because even though it's titled 1992, it was released in 1993. So it shipped 1 year late. If you don't, who knows the Sisters of Mercy? Awesome. For those who don't, I'm sorry, I'm gonna make an awful noise. For those who don't, the Sisters, they're an English rock band from the 80s. They're labeled gothic rock, usually, which means that you can only listen to their music while wearing sunglasses at night. Interestingly, they stopped recording music at the start of the 90s. They still exist, but they haven't recorded anything. And one of the last songs they recorded is Temple of Love, 1992. Have you heard this song? Yes. Awesome. If you haven't and you feel like this talk is boring, just stop, go listen to the song. It's 8 minutes long, so you should listen to it 3 times, it'd be good. It's a great song. And I was a bit cheeky when I said that it wasn't released until 1993, because as a single, it was released on time, but it didn't feature on an album until the following year. I tried to explain with my own words what the song is about, and every attempt I made took like 10 minutes, so I cheated, and this is the only time during this talk that I asked an LLM for help, and what it came up with is this, which is so good that I will read it to you right now. It's the story of a forsaken man, consumed by grief and rage, who seeks vengeance on 2 lovers who take sanctuary in the Temple of Love, only to find that it offers no shelter for the storm he brings. Grief, rage, vengeance, these may be things you experience as your day-to-day life as programmers, but hopefully not. And still, I personally learned a lot about programming thanks to the Temple of Love. Now, I don't think there are many temples famous in the computer science world, except maybe for this one. But there's still a connection, because if you're really good at history, you know that the temples of ancient Greece and the pyramids of ancient Egypt are only separated by a couple of months. And there is a famous pyramid in the programming realm, and that is the test pyramid. The test pyramid was first introduced, as far as I know, by Mike Cohn in his book, Succeeding with Agile, which I didn't read because it says Scrum on the cover. But I can still talk about the test pyramid. And basically, it's a simple idea. It says that your test, in your test suite, you can grade your tests on a scale that goes from isolated to integrated. Isolated tests being tests that focus on a very specific part of the application, like a single method from a single object, for example. Because they are so focused, they are fast to run. You could, in theory, run your test without loading the whole application, just loading the file that you want, that contains the source that you want to test, for example. So they are cheap, they are fast, but they are very specific. They don't cover many things. On the opposite end of the pyramid, the integrated test, they go through the whole application. They cross all the layers. They test everything, or at least many things. But because they do that, they are more expensive. They take longer to run. They are more brittle. The more things you test at the same time, the more chances for something breaking you have. Therefore, yeah, they are more expensive. And the idea behind the test pyramid is that you should have lots of isolated tests because they are cheap and fast, and just a few integrated tests because they are expensive and brittle. And once you have these 2 lines, you can draw the rest of the fucking hole and get the pyramid. And that's it. That's the idea behind the test pyramid. My talk is finished. Not yet. When I talk about test pyramid, instead of this isolation versus integration axis, I tend to talk about levels of abstraction, meaning that an integrated test, because it tests everything, it approaches the application from the outside, like a user would. Therefore, all the implementation details, all the small features inside the black box that is the application, they are abstracted away from the test, hence the level of abstraction. And by definition, if you are testing a specific piece of the application, if you are at the bottom of the pyramid, there you are. Oh, you're not. You're missing a slide. Anyway, if you're at the bottom of the pyramid, you are at a low level of abstraction. When it comes to Rails, there are different kinds of tests that one can run and write for Rails. I'm not mentioning RSpec, but it's basically the same thing. So out of the box, Rails offers several kinds of tests, but they're not described through this isolation versus integration or level of abstraction scale. Instead, you have basically 3 types of tests. You can still grade them on the pyramid. You have some tests that inherit from active support test case. That would be the test for the specific pieces of your application, so rather to the bottom of the pyramid. Some tests inherit from action dispatch, system test case. These are the famous system tests. They run the application and they interact with it through a browser. That's the capybara thing and everything. So that's by definition the top of the pyramid. And then you have tests that inherit from action dispatch integration case. This is somewhere in the middle. It tests parts of the application, but not everything. It resists inside for some things. But these are basically the 3 levels that you have in Rails, and then you can assign the different kinds of tests, or recognize, or place the different kinds of tests that you have in the pyramid based on this classification. But enough with the pyramid. I'd like to talk about Temple of Love, because it's such a great song, and it taught me so much. And I would like to share with you what I learned about testing, about the pyramid, and about building a strong pyramid by listening to this song. It's a long song. These are the lyrics. There are lots of them. At the first glance, it may seem a bit confusing, like disorganized, unstructured. To the point that this is the official transcription of the lyrics from a compilation book. And you have to indicate where are the verses and where are the choruses. And you know what it means when you have to comment your code. It's not structured. Or it doesn't look like it, but actually it is very structured. Here is the graphic representation of the drums track. So this is not a music sheet. I know this looks like the front panel of a drum machine, which is fitting because the drummer in the system pharmacy is actually a drum machine called Dr. Avalanche. So this is each symbol is a bar. Each color is a drum pattern. Patterns that are similar have similar colors. Don't try to read that. What I want to show here is that even though it may seem confusing, you can spot patterns. And once you spot patterns, you can identify the structure of the song. Just by adding a couple of white space, you can see, okay, there's some kind of intro, and there are choruses and verses. There is a structure underneath, even if it's not, it doesn't jump at you when you see these small colorful squares. Same goes with the guitar track. I did the same exercise with the guitar. So each circle here is a guitar riff over 4 bars. May look a bit confusing, but actually, if you look for the patterns, you can see the structure. And it's usually based around groups of 3 or 4. And as it happens in programming, we also have, for testing, and specifically low-level testing, we also have a structure and a pattern around groups of 3 or 4 that we can use. And this structure is set up, execute, assert, and tear down. You may see different names. Some people call the first phase arrange and the second one act, I think. But that's basically the idea. A good low-level test should clearly indicate when it's setting up whatever it wants to set up, the things you need for the test to run, the objects you need to instantiate because you want to test something about them. Then you have the execute phase, where you run the code that you want to run. You call the method that you are testing. Then you have the assert phase, where you compare what you got by calling the method and what you actually expect it to have. And then you clean up after you. If you open the file, you need to close the file, and you need to reset the database, stuff like that. Now, usually, the last phase is missing from the test. If you read the test, that's because it's being taken care of by the framework, the testing framework, or even sometimes by language. Rails, for example, will reset the database between each test. But it's still there. It's just you don't have to write it explicitly, but we should keep in mind that there is still this 4th phase. Here's an example of a test that I stumbled upon that did not follow, or at least wasn't explicit about this structure. Is it legible? Hopefully it is. All the examples I'm about to show in this presentation come from actual code base that I've been working with. All I did was sometimes edit them out so they can fit on a slide. And I occasionally replace the name of classes and method with things that I found funnier and also shorter. But this is all, except for one, these are all actual examples. So when I first upon this test, I complained, because I complained a lot, of course, but also because I cannot, in fact, at a glance, understand what this test is about. Sure, you can read the description, but come on. And just by adding a couple of white space, just by making the structure explicit, suddenly it breathes more. Oh, now I get it. Now I can see where the setup is. So this is the thing that the method I'm testing depends on. This is the execution phase. This is the core of the test. This is what the test is about. And this is the assertion. Okay, this is how the thing should be working. It's much more legible. And because it is legible, I can see that, well, there's something weird, right? Why do we have something about the assertion being defined in the setup phase? This makes no sense. So this leads to a nice refactoring of just, you know what? Let's remove this, put it in the right place, and make the test even more legible, to the point that you probably see further improvements that you could be making. If you don't, well, ask me, open a PR maybe. But it is, in fact, I think, much more legible. And that's the lesson, the first lesson I took from the song is keeping the low-level test structured. Now, I said that the 4 phases would be set up, execute, assert, and tear down. If you use certain kind of test doubles, like mocks and spies, this doesn't apply. So the solution here is simple, just don't use mocks. You'll be better off anyway. Another caveat is that you can compress these different steps, and usually the execute and the assert phase can be compressed. For example, I kind of like this test, it's not too bad. The interesting thing in this one is this line, where in the same operation, we do 2 things. We execute the method we want. We have the execution phase, we call the total cost method, but we are also doing the assertion phase, because we are comparing this result with something that we were expecting. Personally, I think it's fine. I do that from time to time. I only do that for very short and simple tests. I would not do that in a very complicated one. And I would try not to go overboard with that. This is an example of going overboard. You can find tests that are, can you read that? I think you can. This one has been shortened, compressed to the bare minimum. The whole test fits on a single line. But the reason it does so, the secret behind that, is that you have the whole bunch of stuff that has been moved out. The 4 stages are still there. They've just been moved outside of the test. And here it fits on a slide, but imagine that on a long file. You have to scroll up. What is the setup? I don't know. Let's scroll to the top of the file. Okay, this is what we are using. Okay, let's go down to This is going too far. Unfortunately, some testing frameworks, well, RSpec, will make it very easy to fall into this trap because it provides the DSL that makes it possible. So my advice there, this is my advice. This is not the song speaking. This is me speaking. My advice is don't use RSpec. Thank you. Great minds think alike. I'm pretty sure you like the song too. Because once again, you want to keep the low-level test structured, and it's easy to lose the structure if you try to be too smart and too tiny and to compress things too much. And why should you do that? It improves legibility. It highlights the purpose of each test. You can focus on the execute phase and know what it is about, so it makes debugging way easier. And also, it will reveal pain points. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes there, seconds at least. One of the things I loved in the previous talk was the mention of pain points. I think one of the best things one can do when writing software is to listen to one's pain. Like, if you cannot, for some reason, stick to the conventional structure with your test, there is something wrong with your code. You should be able to lay down your test and make each step explicit. If you cannot, it says something that you should be investigating. That you should be investigated, sorry. And sometimes, by sticking, you will reveal things that are issues, like duplication. If the setup is too complicated, it says something about your test. So keeping a clear structure will reveal the pain points of your application. That's for the first thing I learned about the song. But one of the reasons why we tend to forget about the importance of having our one's test being structured is the obsession with dry and trying not to repeat oneself. We know that repeating code is bad, and even worse, it's ugly, right? It's not elegant. But as a matter of fact, in Temple of Love, there's quite a lot of repetition. In the chorus, for example, you have the words "in the Temple of Love" being repeated all over the chorus. But in the verse as well, in the stanzas as well, you have words being repeated all over again. In poetry, repetition adds something. It brings dynamics, it makes the song more catchy. It is useful. It's not to be shunned. So I think it's the same thing that goes with our one's test. Here is back to the previous example, 2 tests that have been not only compressed to the bare minimum, but also everything that was common between these 2 tests have been moved away. You can guess that the assertion phase was common, so it was moved away. Everything has been removed from this test. Sure, they're terse, but they don't say anything. Good luck debugging that, especially since you have to, once again, go back and look at everything to understand what these 2 tests actually do. If you undry your test, if you embrace repetition, if you feel like you should, this is the good time in the test suite to have a chorus. Everything is much more legible, to the point that you probably see that these tests are actually ridiculous. And I don't know why they're still in the code base, but when I was preparing this, I was like, you know what, there's something I should fix, because this makes absolutely no sense. But it was hidden behind all the dryness of the tests. Another thing that I've seen about dryness is these kind of things. Meta-programming the tests. So for some reason, someone at a certain time had 2 tests to write about things that were so similar that they felt interesting to just create a data structure and iterate over there. It makes no sense. Like, the data will not change at runtime. So all you are saving by doing that is some typing. But the cost of this savings, air quotes, is that this makes no sense. You cannot read this thing. I'm getting pumped up just because of that. It's so much easier to write 2 tests, and it's fine if they're repetitive. It's fine because if you don't dry the test, once again, it will help you stick to the sound structure. It will improve the legibility, back to this thing again. And once again, it will reveal the pain points. It will show you all the mistakes, all the errors, all the frailties of either your code or your test, because everything is so obvious. And once again, just for free, don't use RSpec. There's a third thing that one can learn just by looking at the song, and this time I want to focus on the lyrics. So I know there's a lot of them. Don't try to read them. That's 600 words, I think. But one can focus on the important words. One can focus on the semantic fields in this text. So back to high school. Semantic fields would be the themes, the ideas around which several words tend to gravitate in a text, and they reveal what the text is about. And even though the song is so long, there are only 2 semantic fields in Temple of Love. The first one is about elements, like you have the fire, the wind, thunder, rain, and of course they represent the emotions of the protagonist, the rage, the grief, the bad things they want to do. And the other semantic field is about construction materials. You have walls, mortar, bricks, and they represent either the Temple of Love, like the actual structure, or the love that the 2 lovers share, and hope that it will protect them from the vengeance of the third person. The equivalent in testing of the semantic fields in a text, I say, and the song says, is the recurring testing data. So all tests need data, right? You're testing, you need stuff to test upon, you need to instantiate your objects, but some come up more often than not. If your application is an accounting application, you'll probably have lots of tests that start in the setup phase by creating an invoice object, for example, or a VAT object, or whatever. What the song says is that it's fine not to have that many semantic fields in your application. So the recurring data, usually the recurring data, because it is so recurring, we tend to have tools to help us create it. We don't try to instantiate a new invoice every time. Instead, we'll have things like factories or fixtures to do the thing for us, a repository of the testing data. These are the semantic fields of your application. If you look at your fixtures or factories, you know what the song is about. And the song having so few semantic fields shows us that it's fine not to have fixtures or factory for everything in your application. Here's a nice example that I found for once. I replaced, once again, the classes, but the idea is that for this setup, we need 2 objects. One is a musician, and the other is a record company. The musician is fetched from a fixture, but not the record company. It's created ad hoc, just for the test. There's no factory or fixture for this one. And what this means is that in this application, record companies do not matter, but musicians do. And upon this, I built another. This is the only example where I'm cheating, and this is made up. But I would not be surprised to see this kind of test as well, of setup as well. We create 2 musicians. We need 2 musicians. One is fetched from the fixture file, but not the other one. And it does say something. It says that in this application, well, Patricia, the bass player, is not as important as a songwriter. And as a bass player myself, I know that we do not matter that much. So yeah, keeping the semantic fields limited in quantity and in scope. There are good reasons to stick to a limited set of testing data. As I've said, it highlights the business domain. Just by looking at the features of factories that you have, you know what this application is about. It will also lower the maintenance. If you do not generate a fixture for every single class that you add, if you do not create a factory trait for every variant of an object that you need in a single given test, you will lower the maintenance cost of all these factories and fixtures. And it will, once again, reveal the pain points, because if for some reason creating an object is so difficult that you feel the need to go through a factory or a fixture, it says something about your application. It should not be difficult to create a single model for a simple unit test. And talking about pain points, I find that factories make it way, way too easy to go overboard with this. They can be so complex that you can easily hide the difficulties and hide the pain points behind a simple tray in a factory, which is why my other personal advice is to use fixtures and not factories. Because fixtures, they are so fast to be unwieldy. Like if your business domain, if your model layer is too complicated and you use fixtures, you will know that right away. So this is a significant pain that you could that you could easily listen to. And this advice actually applies both to low-level tests and high-level tests. So let's talk a little bit about high-level tests, if you don't mind. And let's stick to the literary analysis of the lyrics. And instead of the semantic fields, I would like to talk about the registers. So no, I'm not talking about the computer registers. This is not a talk about assembly programming on all computers. I'm talking about the language registers, the kind of words that the author chooses to use, depending on the intended audience. For example, in English, we could say that we have the normal registers, the words, the kind of sentences, the turn of phrases that I would use when I speak to my mother, for example. I speak in the normal manner of speech. Then you have the literary register. This is the kind of words that I would use when I speak to my mother-in-law and I want to impress her with all the fancy words that I know and all the books that I've read. And then there is the vulgar language register. This is the one I use when I speak about my mother-in-law. In Temple of Love, if we take this verse, for example, I would say that we are in the literary register. There are metaphors, imagery, it's very poetic. It's not over the top. This is not trying to, imitate Byron, but it's still literary. To contrast, I will show you lyrics from another English band called Cradle of Filth, and they play extreme metal, so they like their music to be off-putting, a bit upsetting. And as you can clearly see in these lyrics, we are also in the literary register. We have a mention of Caliban from the Shakespeare play. We have the word whereupon, not used every day. But there's also a swear word and something about mothers that I cannot say here, but is definitely in the vulgar register. So they are mix and matching the levels. They're not sticking to a constant level, to a constant register. And this is off-putting. This is black metal. Now, I love black metal, but I don't want my test suite to be a black metal show. And the equivalent in a test suite of the language register would be the levels of abstraction. And the lesson from the song here is to stick to a consistent level of abstraction and not trying to, scream and shriek like Danny Filth. For example, this is a test that I found at first pretty good. It's a high-level test. It's a system test. It stays at a consistent level, at first at least. You're interacting with the application from the outside, just clicking on the page and checking. I don't know about the first assertion there, but who cares? But then suddenly, towards the end, you have this. Suddenly, we are making some kind of active record query. So we are reaching inside the black box. This is vulgar. This is the black metal sneaking in the test. And it would be so easy not to do that. There should be a way to test that whatever was created was actually created through the UI as well. In this case, it's a visiting page that would show the information. The lesson here is that I think it's important to stick to a consistent level of abstraction. And why should you? Well, you should because you should be able to. If for some reason you cannot do that, once again, it says something about the code base. Maybe there is a missing feature in your base. Maybe the page that I was referring to in the test doesn't even exist, but it says something. If it doesn't exist, is it something that's been forgotten? Should we add the page? Or is it on purpose? And if it's on purpose, then why did we feel the need to still add a test? If there's no need to go to the page, why do we want to check something in the system test? Probably because we have some kind of low-level test that is missing. We know that the operation can fail, and we have no other way to test that than to use the system test, the high-level test. And that's a pain point that should be fixed, and that is revealed if you stick to a consistent level of abstraction. Now, yeah, I shouldn't go a bit faster, maybe. There's another thing about system test that is interesting from the song, I guess, and that is the fact that it tells a story. It is about something, once again. Maybe not the best story in the world, but still, it is a story. And I think in itself, it's a good advice for high-level tests. High-level tests should tell a story. I found this one on the source for Discourse, the application, the forum application in Ruby, and I really liked it. It's a good high-level test. It sticks at the consistent level, of course, but more importantly, it tells the story. It tells you, when you want to search something, when a typical user wants to search something, here's what they do. They move, they search, they go back and forth. It is a whole story. It is worth running the test. Here's a counterexample from a code base I've been working on. This is not a story. This is a tweet at best. We are just testing a specific detail in the view. So we are actually doing a unit test for the view, a low-level test for the view. But to do that, we go through all the stuff that goes behind the system test. We are running Capybara just to ensure that a couple of data attributes have been added to the view. This is wasteful. As I've said, the idea behind the test pyramid is that you should have as few tests as you can at the higher level, and this is wasting both CPU time and the allocated amount of high-level tests that you can have. So the lesson here is to tell a complete story with each high-level test, and to do that to avoid wasting your time. This test, the view test, would be way faster if it was actually a view test inheriting from action test case and not from system whatever. And it will keep your pyramid pointy. You cannot afford to have so many tests. So you only write tests for the things that do matter. And if they matter, there will be an actual story and not just a detail. And talking about keeping the pyramid pointy, my final point would be about the release of the single Temple of Love. As I said, it was released as single, and in fact, it was released in several versions. You have the 12-inch version, and you have the 7-inch version. You can spot the difference. The difference is in the running time. So the 12-inch, the song is 8 minutes long, and only 4:40 in the 12-inch. I also found a third version of the song at live air quotes, at Top of the Pops, and this is only 3 minutes long. So the lesson here is that the band was fine with cutting down and trimming down their song to fit whatever constraint they had, whether it be the type of single they were releasing or the constraints of the TV show. The example I showed earlier was actually followed by this one. So we had a test about creating something through the web UI, and then there's a test about creating something, but for some reason the creation failed. A whole system test for something that is unlikely or should not happen. I think this is the kind of thing that the band would have cut out in order to make the song fit. This is craft. You do not need to go through a system test for things that are now the main scenario, the main feature. You can as easily test the management of errors in this example, or validation errors, through a unit test. You can do that at the lower level and save the amount of system test, high-level test that you use. I would say that a good story is basically following the happy path. The scenarios that you test in your high-level test should be the happy one, where everything works fine. This is the main case, and keep the exceptions for lower tests. However, there's a caveat to that, and that is that even pyramids need scaffolding from time to time. And what I like to do is I like to write my test first, because I'm an old fart. And what I would do in the case of the sad path would still be to write the system test for the sad path, then write the implementation along with all the unit tests that it needs. And once I have that, I would remove the system test. So it would exist, but only temporarily. And in the final commit, in the final code base, there will not be the system test for the sad path. But I would have been using it as a scaffolding for the rest. So the lesson that I drew from these different releases of the single is that it's fine to trim down the high-level tests. By focusing on the happy path, by testing the rest at the lower level, test the exceptions and the errors at a lower level, even though it's fine to temporarily use system test for the sad path as a scaffolding. And some people will feel uncomfortable writing a test and then deleting it, but once you get used to it, it feels really good. I still have a couple of points to make, and I still have, I'm a bit over time. I'll go fast. I haven't talked about the middle of the pyramid, the intermediate layer, and that's because it says service test. And if you know me, you know what I think about services. This words mean nothing, so I do not care about the middle of it, and I will not be talking about it. Instead, what I would like to talk about is the fact that the sisters are still touring right now. They were playing in France a couple of days ago. I think they are playing in Germany this week. I would not recommend going to a sisters show. I saw them last year, and it was really bad. Like, they are old. It felt like a cover band playing on playback. It was pathetic. And it left me with a lot of questions. And one of the questions was, well, if the sisters are now irrelevant, does this mean that the test pyramid is irrelevant as well? And I'm not the only one asking these questions. Some guy on the internet posted an article saying that, yeah, maybe system tests are not that interesting. And he's not the only one. I picked this example because, well, you know why. But you can find several people arguing that this is not important, that the test pyramid itself is not important. But having read through many of them, I came to the conclusion that basically what all these people say is that high-level tests are too brittle. It's always about high-level tests. They are too brittle. We used to have too many of them, and therefore our test suite was too long or too brittle. But we still want a lot. Once again, I missed, okay, never mind. The third line was that people still want, even people who complain about system tests, still want tests at a high level, and if possible, lots of tests at a high level. So basically what I understand from this, from what they're saying is that instead of this pyramid, they want this kind of pyramid. But as far as I'm concerned, it is still a pyramid. So I don't think that this makes the test pyramid irrelevant. In conclusion, personally, I will not go to see the sisters show, but I would keep listening to Temple of Love on repeat as I'm writing tests. And as I'm writing tests, I will always keep my low-level test structured. I will not dry them. I will stick to a limited set of testing data. I will keep the high-level test as a consistent level of abstraction. Use them to tell complete stories and not just blitz and bobs. And trim them down to the happy path. And that's it. Thank you. If you want to discuss the middle of the pyramid, or if you want me to rant about the sisters, there's the footnotes for the talk in the other QR code. Thank you.